Hey, this is Mike with Riding in the Ozarks. Today I'm going to tell you about the Rat Run and the history of the Rat Run. So the Rat Run starts October 2nd through October 4th this year. In the past, I've gone up on a Saturday and the turnout was not nearly as big. Sunday appears to be the day to go. So that's what we've been doing for the last couple years since we made that mistake, and that's what I would recommend for anybody who wanted to get the full Rat Run experience, October 4th. Now, I've been going for 4 years at least. This will be my 5th year. This is going to be the 41st annual Rat Run. If you haven't seen any of my videos on the Rat Run, I'll throw a link up above. So we went last year and we hit a goose on the interstate on the way home. There's burnouts, there's sometimes guys doing the bike stunts in the cages, guys doing burnouts, stunt riders, professional stuff. So it's a great time. 1,000 to 2,000 people make the run every year on average. We'll see how it turns out this year with the COVID deal, but I expect even bigger turnout because people haven't had a lot to go do and they're dying to go do bike stuff. So I find the history of the Rat Run very interesting. It was started by a guy named Joe Sparrow. I got to meet Joe at Sturgis last year. Here's a picture of me and him standing in front of the Clockworks windshield test bike that I think he did 500,000 miles on, testing the windshield for him. I'm going to throw a link up here to a YouTube video about Joe that was out 4 or 5 years ago. Joe works for JP Cycles at the rallies. He also travels. He's known on Instagram as the Wandering Sparrow. I'll put his Instagram tag down here. I highly recommend you go check him out and follow him on Instagram. I'd love to interview Joe and get this story in his own words one day. And maybe that'll happen. We are kind of Facebook friends now since I met him at Sturgis and stuff. While I'm reading you the history of the Rat Run, I'm going to throw some video I've taken and some pictures I've taken of the Rat Run over the years. And I'm going to throw in a few pictures I found on the internet while I was looking at the history of the Rat Run. People threw some really cool old photos from the history of it in the comments. So, the history of the Rat Run, and this was written by someone else, not by Joe, someone that interviewed him. But I'm going to cut to the meat of it. Back in 1977, Joe had purchased a 1972 Daytona 500 Triumph when he worked at Bob Schultz Honda. A guy was traveling through the St. Louis area from West Virginia to California and his taillight had vibrated loose. He'd stopped at a shop and they wanted to know how much money to fix the problem. The shop offered him $100 for the Triumph. So he left, went further down the highway and stopped at Bob Schultz. The salesman told Joe that this guy would probably take anything over $100 for the bike. Joe test rode the Triumph and the clutch was fine, so Joe offered the guy $110 and the guy took the money. Joe then started changing it into a bobber, welded the bolt-on hardtail, painted the frame, got a later front end for it. Then it sat for a while, and when Joe started working at Burbis Valley, one of his co-workers didn't have a bike to ride. Joe told him, if you want a bike to ride, all you have to do is put it together. But he didn't want to do that. So Joe thought he would just put it together as is. He started making it real nice, and it turned into using what parts he had on hand, and that's how the Rat came to be. When Joe would go out riding the Triumph with his friends, he would run out of gas, or something would always happen. So back in 1979, for the last ride of the summer, they started calling it the Rat Ride Gas Guess. Joe would put gas in the tank, tape the tank closed, and everyone on the ride guessed how many miles it would go before it ran out of gas. Whoever guessed closest to the mileage would win a trophy that was made out of motorcycle parts. With 17 to 20 riders, that's how this whole event got started. One year, Frank the Cromer of St. Louis Triangle Plating Company made a trophy out of 2 giant nuts, 2 foot tall, with a Harley rod welded between the nuts. Another year, the trophy was 5 foot tall, made out of an antique lamp. It had floorboards and on it with a Sportster headlight and even turn signals. Joe said they had the most fun on the first few of the Rat Ride Gas Guess, though word of mouth of this event grew year after year. Then Joe started working at Osborne's on St. Charles Rock Road. He started the ride at Dorset and 270. They would ride through Creve Coeur Park. Then another year we started in the park. We would ride through St. Charles and West Alton to the Great River Road and end up at Paramarquee Park. We would go to the very top of the park where you could drag race on a single lane road and everyone left you alone. Those were the best years. But then one year a park ranger drove up on the road and a group of riders didn't care too much for him disrupting the races. They ended up breaking out the guy's windows and someone took a crap inside the car and rubbed it all over the interior. The next day the police called Joe and asked him what happened. Joe told him he didn't know what had happened. The officer said, well, they all had your t-shirts on. Joe sold well over 100 t-shirts, so he had no idea who it could have been. At the time, DNA testing was just getting started, so Joe said, with all that poop in the car, there must be some butt hair. Can't you get some of that hair and extract DNA out of it? Case closed. Unfortunately, after this, there were no more races. One time when leaving Osborne's West, Joe had a pet rat at the time, and he brought it with him on the ride in a cage. When he left, he noticed he had a flat tire, but rode it anyway to Dorset and 270, then continued on to Shirley's. The ride practically shook the rat to death. People were feeding it beer, whiskey, and even giving it drugs. The poor thing was a wreck. Joe jumped on his panhead and left the bike and the rat at the bar. Some girl rescued my rat and brought it back to me about a week later. She gave it a bath and detoxicated the little guy. Another time, a friend of Joe's asked him if he wanted a frozen pig's head. Joe said, hell yes, I want it. Joe had a luggage rack welded on the front of his bike, and he strapped that frozen head to it. Well, that head didn't stay frozen too long. It was dripping blood all over him, and the smell wasn't too good. Joe recounts one year was an overnighter off Highway 47 with bands, and it was great, but it rained the next day. Some still rode out in the rain, but we did postpone the ride until the next weekend. So really there were 2 rides that year. Joe's best memory over the years is seeing the people that are still riding he rode with 30 years ago. The ride has started at places all over the years. Burbus Valley, Osborne's West, Cadillac Jack's. The ride has stopped at many places over the years as well. Joe said they would stop at every bar along the route and buy them out of beer. When the place was out of beer, they would leave. The places just weren't ready for us. Joe would even visit the place ahead of time and let them know we were coming. One year, a place in West Alton said that they didn't want them to stop. Well, they did anyway and bought them out of beer. I asked Joe what he thinks about the future of the rat run. Joe mentioned that Shady Jack Saloon is going to try and be a starting point. Crazy Horse Saloon might be another good start. As long as they can come up with scenic routes and plenty of bar stops and give the people what they want. I hope it will be entertaining for riders going. It would be best to have one starting point. Joe would like to see it all come together somehow. Joe thinks that Long Shot Saloon in Portage de Sioux will certainly be the destination point for years to come. It would be great to see some drag racing somewhere safe. In case you're wondering, the Rat Triumph went through its second flood in '93 and Joe sold it for $115. So he made $5 off the bike. Things to note, the Rat Ride Gas Guess was the first year that shirts were made. One year, a weld-on handlebar broke from a crash when a friend was riding it. Joe was riding it with one bar, and luckily he had the throttle side. He was thinking that was going to be real bad if he gets pulled over while riding through Wellston. Joe had never had a real license plate on the Rat Triumph. I'm going to throw a flyer up on the screen now for this year's Rat Run. Hope you guys can make it. We always enjoy it and usually take 10 or 15 people to the Rat Run, and I hope to see you there this year. I don't know what time we're going to start, where. We're going on vacation, and this video will probably come out when we get back, right before the Rat Run. Maybe I'll have some more details by then. Often I record these videos a week or 2 ahead of time. So for the latest information, always check my Facebook or Instagram under Riding in the Ozarks. If you like this video, make sure you give it a big thumbs up. If you do that YouTube thing, check out the content on my channel. And if you dig it, you can hit that subscribe button down below. Don't forget to ring the bell to be notified the next time I drop a new video. And as always, stay safe, thank you for your support, and keep on riding.